All right, here's your reminder that daylight saving time ends this weekend, which means it's going to get dark earlier, which means it's going to be harder to see deer, which means paying attention could save your life. We're taking some time this afternoon to talk about deer, their behavior this time of year, and it's all just to keep an eye on you, to make sure you're safe and can keep your best defense up. With us to help with that is wildlife biologist Joe Rogerson. Joe is an environmental program manager for species conservation and research with the Delaware Department of Natural Resources and Environmental Control. His business card is longer than my arm. Joe, thanks for talking to us this afternoon.
Thank you for having me.
So, Joe, let me start here by saying I was driving to work, middle of the night one night, my Jeep, when suddenly 3 deer run out in front of me, and there was nothing I could do to avoid them. Is there a time where you're more or less likely to run into deer?
Well, specifically this time of year in the fall, the end of October into the latter part of November is the peak time of year that we see deer vehicle collisions. There's a couple things at play there. It is the breeding season for deer in the middle of November, so they are increasingly more active as it's their one time of year where they seek a mate, so they're moving more for the purposes of breeding. In addition to daylight savings time, which is going to occur this Sunday, it's going to put more motorists on the roads at dawn and dusk, which are kind of the peak times when we see an increase in deer activity. So we have more motorists on the roads at the time when deer are moving around more frequently, as well as the time of year that they're moving around more frequently, which all leads to a higher risk of having a deer vehicle collision.
Talking about the roads, are there any kind of road conditions that we need to pay particular attention to?
As you probably well know, we have deer in urban areas and agricultural areas and forest areas. You can pretty much find deer virtually anywhere. But what we find are areas where there are woods on both sides of the roads are typical travel corridors for deer. So if you're driving within a wooded area, say large ag fields, and then you come up to a stretch of woods that spans both sides of the road, those are areas that you want to be particularly observant for, perhaps even slow down as you go through those areas. But a deer could run out across in front of you in the middle of an ag field or even an urban, suburban, residential area too. But our forested areas along the roads are definitely the highest risk areas.
They're pretty from afar, but you get up close, and those are pretty big animals, aren't they?
Yes. Folks are generally surprised to hear about how big a deer is. An adult doe could go anywhere from 100 to 130 to 140 pounds, with adult males or bucks tipping the scales at over 200 pounds. So definitely not something you want to tangle with.
Is it always a herd that we need to watch out for? Can there be a single deer?
There can be a single deer, but often they do travel in groups. Again, particularly this time of year, like I said, it's the breeding season. So oftentimes you'll have bucks that are trailing groups of does. So you'd have, both genders mixed together. But if you see one up ahead, you need to slow down, put your foot on the brake and check and observe and make sure that there's not any more going to be crossing the road.
I've always heard you see one, you better look for the others. What
You're
about
right.
deer whistles? Do those things work?
There's been a ton of research into trying minimizing deer vehicle collisions, not just from a human safety standpoint, but as a tremendous expense, to pay for these vehicles to be fixed and stuff like that. Unfortunately, deer whistles or similar kind of devices have not been shown to scientifically reduce any kind of risk or chance you have of having a deer vehicle collision. Really, it's a matter of the motorist paying attention and being observant and driving safely this time of year is the best thing that we recommend folks to do.
Okay. Let me ask you this. I'm driving along. I see some deer begin to step out in front of me. What should I do?
The best thing to do is hopefully you have enough time that you can slow down or come to a complete stop if you need to. With that in mind, if you have someone following behind you, a quick glance in the rearview mirror to hopefully you see that they're slowing down as well. One of the things we don't recommend doing is swerving to avoid the deer. While you may get lucky and miss them that one time, oftentimes we see accidents that involve deer where the deer was not actually struck, but the motorist lost control of their vehicle and went off the road, which could actually cause, greater risk of injury or more damage to the vehicle. Nobody wants to hit a deer, but, hitting a 130-pound deer is better than hitting a telephone pole or something similar alongside of the road.
Yeah.
hopefully you're paying attention enough and you're driving slow enough in those areas that you'll be able to slow down ahead of time and avoid the animals.
Joe, I hate to admit, that's what I did. I tried to swerve and I missed the deer, but I totaled my Jeep. All right, we do everything we can to avoid the collision, but we hit a deer. What do we need to do now?
Best thing to do is to call 911, have a police officer respond, particularly if there's any injuries involved with you or any passengers with you. We do not recommend going up to the animal, in particular, especially if the animals are maybe still alive. They're obviously going to be frightened, disoriented. We already talked about how big these animals are. They can inflict damage and injury upon you. So if you escape the accident unharmed, the last thing we want is the deer to impact you. So call the police, call, medical services, and, then we can coordinate getting a tow truck if necessary, and they can fill out the accident report that you can file with your insurance company. So that's the best thing to do.
Joe Rogerson with DNREG, thanks for taking the time to talk to us this afternoon.
Thank you very much.